During the late 1940s and early 1950s, the United States and the Soviet Union were involved in a competition to build up their military forces. This was motivated by the concern that one country might gain an upper hand over the other. In 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb. This event motivated American leaders to create a stronger weapon, resulting in the successful testing of the hydrogen bomb, H-bomb, in 1952. In reply, the Soviets conducted their own test of the H-bomb in 1953. The arms race was a competition between two powerful countries, each trying to have better military abilities. President Dwight D. Eisenhower's foreign policy centered on taking the lead in the arms race and implementing a strategy known as massive retaliation. This indicated that the United States would react with strong force to any nuclear attack, with the goal of deterring the Soviets from starting such an attack. If both countries have the same nuclear power, any attack would lead to the complete destruction of both nations. This creates a situation called mutually assured destruction. Consequently, both countries were unwilling to take the risk of attacking each other. John Foster Dulles, who served as Eisenhower's Secretary of State, strongly opposed communism and supported a policy known as brinkmanship. This policy required being ready to use nuclear weapons in response to any aggression from an enemy, escalating the situation to the point of full-scale war. The competition for weapons caused the creation of many nuclear bombs, and many Americans were scared of a possible nuclear attack. The arms race affected the American economy by causing munitions companies to grow due to increased weapon production. President Eisenhower also had concerns about the increasing defense spending and the impact of these companies on the nation's economy and politics. During President Eisenhower's time in office, the United States started to depend more on the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, for gathering information from other countries and conducting secret operations to undermine or remove governments that were seen as not friendly to the United States. An example of a CIA operation occurred in Iran in 1951. When the Prime Minister of Iran took control of the country's oil fields, Britain decided to stop purchasing Iranian oil, which resulted in an economic crisis. Due to concerns about Iran seeking assistance from the Soviet Union, the CIA convinced the Iranian ruler, the Shah, to dismiss the Prime Minister. As a result, control over Iranian oil fields was restored to the Western countries. In 1954, the CIA intervened in Guatemala because President Eisenhower thought the country was getting too close to the communists. The CIA trained a military force that successfully toppled the government of Guatemala. The United States provided assistance to newly established governments in Africa and Asia to encourage the adoption of democratic systems. While certain countries opted to stay unaligned with either the United States or the Soviet Union, others aligned themselves with the United States in order to counter the influence of the Soviet Union. After the passing of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin in 1953, there was a temporary relaxation of tensions between the superpowers. This period became known as the thaw in the Cold War. Nevertheless, after West Germany became a member of NATO, the Soviet Union reacted by establishing the Warsaw Pact alongside its satellite nations. This alliance was created to counter potential threats from NATO and to suppress any internal uprising. In 1955, a crisis occurred in the Middle East when Egypt took control of the Suez Canal. This led to a conflict involving Britain, France, and Israel. The United States and the Soviet Union disagreed with the use of force, so the United Nations stepped in to stop the fighting. This intervention helped Egypt keep control of the canal. In response to the crisis, President Eisenhower introduced the Eisenhower Doctrine. This doctrine promised that the United States would protect the Middle East from communist aggression. In 1956, Hungary had a rebellion against the Soviet Union. The rebellion aimed to establish a democratic government and hold free elections. Nevertheless, the reform movement was suppressed by Soviet tanks, and the United States refrained from intervening since its containment policy did not include removing the Soviet Union from its satellite nations. Following the demise of Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev assumed leadership of the Soviet Union. Khrushchev held contrasting beliefs to Stalin, as he believed in the possibility of achieving communism through peaceful methods. The space race started when the Soviets surprised everyone by launching the first man-made satellite, Sputnik, on October 4, 1957. This gave them an early advantage in exploring space. The United States made significant efforts to catch up in the space race. Following a number of obstacles, the United States managed to effectively launch its inaugural satellite on January 31, 1958. During that time, the CIA carried out spy missions over the Soviet Union using U-2 aircraft. These planes flew at high altitudes and were able to remain undetected at first. However, in 1960, the Soviets showed that they knew about the spy missions by shooting down a U-2 aircraft flown by Francis Gary Powers. This caused increased tensions between the two superpowers. The U-2 incident happened just before a meeting between President Eisenhower and Khrushchev. Initially, Eisenhower refused to acknowledge that the U-2 had engaged in espionage. However, he ultimately had to concede the veracity of the situation prior to the meeting. During the meeting, Khrushchev criticized the United States and then left abruptly. The U-2 incident harmed Eisenhower's capacity to engage in negotiations with the Soviets.